Follow, Marcus Garvey today. Why can't I, follow? Come on. Follow, Marcus Garvey today. Why can't I, follow? Everywhere we go, I will go. And everything he say, oh yes it's hard. So I can die and follow him. Come on, let us follow. Follow, Marcus Garvey. Why can't I follow? He never commit no crime. He always do right. So why can't I follow? Follow, Marcus Garvey. Why can't I follow? Follow, Marcus Garvey today. Follow, he never disobey his grandmother. No. He always obey his grandfather. So why can't I follow him? Yes, we should follow. Come on, follow, Marcus Garvey. Why can't I follow? We should follow. I'm ready. Do you ready? I'm waiting and follow. Yes, follow him. Come on, let's go where we go. Let's say the words he said. Oh yes, it's fun. All right.
Yes, greetings, everyone, and thank you for joining us once again on Unity and Solidarity TV for another big and serious conversation. Today is Sunday, August 25th, 2024. I am your host, Bakari Makaru, coming to you live from the beautiful island of Swaliga here on Unity and Solidarity TV. And of course, you can always find us on our Facebook page, UNIA ACS St. Martin chapter. And of course, you can always check out the live on my personal Facebook page, which is Bakari Makaru, of course. And if you are new to the channel, please do us a huge favor and of course, like and share and subscribe, of course, so that you may receive updates and notifications whenever we upload videos, or just share interesting content that we believe the family could benefit from. Today, family, today marks a very special milestone for Unity and Solidarity TV, because we'll be having our first online book club. And as you can imagine, I'm very excited about this, about embarking on this particular journey of exploration, learning, and meaningful conversation on the book St. Martin, Destabilization of the French Caribbean by none other than Miss Daniela Jeffrey. And more importantly, I would like to thank Miss Soshina Stephen for being part of this very important milestone. And of course, with a very, how you say, a good understanding of her passion, of her strong interest in these subject matters. I know for a fact that we're going to have a good conversation today. So, family, we chose the book St. Martin, Destabilization of the French Caribbean for several reasons. The first being it offers a comprehensive and detailed exploration of St. Martin's social and economic history. It provides an in-depth look at the hidden forces that have shaped our society, right? And most of all, it is our tribute to a great thinker, heroine, and St. Martin, who wanted nothing more than for young people to become familiar with her work and to understand, right? Understand our historical development as a people so that they could better be prepared to address and respond to those forces in the future. So again, besides that, we are just hoping that this humble initiative will foster an online community where we can delve into literature that not only entertains but also enlighten. And of course, we want to promote critical thinking, cultural appreciation, and a deeper understanding of the social, economic, and historical forces that shaped our lives. So, most of all, we believe that this important work will answer the question, how did we as a St. Martin people get here? And most of all, what needs to be done? We will do our best to ensure that our time together will be structured and purposeful, of course. And yeah, this is just a first out of many, of course. And yeah, as I said, we're just looking forward to having a great discussion. Our session today will be confined to the preface of the book. And if time permits, because we try to exercise some discipline by having the podcast for at least an hour today, right? So we are excited about that. All right. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Soshina Stephen. I mean, technically, I don't have to welcome her because I think by now she is part of the Unity and Solidarity family. So I would just say welcome back. So welcome back. Greetings, neighbor.
Thank you. Thank you. Greetings, neighbor. Thank you for having me again for part two of this very thought-provoking but very exciting um, session on Daniela Jeffrey, her work, and what she stood for, not only in her political status, but also historical and cultural, like you mentioned earlier. It is an honor. I want to say a huge hello to the UNIA family listening in and to the audience at large for taking your Sunday off to, you know, join us as we discuss a very important hero and iconic person in the history of St. Martin's identity and culture.
All right. Thank you so much. So, neighbor, we are going to be discussing this very important book, right? And I know how we just get when we're discussing literature, especially on topics close to our heart, right? So this is the book, St. Martin, Destabilization of the French Caribbean, right? Before we jump into the heart of the
Yes,
book,
sir.
right? What are your thoughts when it comes to the title? Just the title alone. What are your thoughts?
The thoughts, I mean, for me, this evokes a lot of, I mean, diverse ideas, you know. For me, it speaks to a particular transition from one period to another, where if it's destabilized, the assumption lead to us thinking that there was a moment when St. Martin's historic, cultural, traditional, historic timeline was stable. And we will of course explore what that looked like, what that meant, what definition that gave rise to at the time, à l'époque. But for me, if the title is such that we need to have it on a book and to talk about it, at length in written work, it means that there was a transformation from one status to another. And then we need to, of course, discuss and establish what that transformation is, what happened, what occurred. So for me, that is how I when I picked up the book, that is what jumped out at me. And then having read myself or read at least portions of it over the years, for sure confirmed that there had to have been a transformational change of some sort from one status, stability, to destabilization, and what that looked like.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. When I first saw it, right, and having a little better understanding of whom Daniela Jeffrey was, I am realizing that perhaps this is something that she would have done intentionally, to grab the reader's attention. You understand what I'm saying? Because usually we are accustomed to more softer titles, as it were, more friendlier titles, one that does not shock, right? One that does not provoke. So to read a book, to read a title that just says St. Martin, Destabilization of the French Caribbean, my first initial reaction was, but what she mean? You understand? And more importantly, why would she link St. Martin, the happenings in St. Martin, right, to then to say what's happening in St. Martin, how it extends itself to destabilize in the Caribbean, you know? So another part of me was like, okay, so that means she situates St. Martin at the center, not at the periphery, at the center, to show what happens here probably had waves of effects in other regions, right? So that caught my attention. All right,
Yeah,
that caught my attention. Yeah, you want to say something?
indeed. No, I said indeed. That is for
Okay.
sure the perspective from which the title was derived, or used or created. So for sure, I think I could agree with that as well.
Okay. So let's jump in, right? Let's jump in. Let's go to the preface. All right. We see that, and I want to show off for a minute. All right. I want to show off for a minute to let the family see, you know, it was custom. I got my little autograph and thing, and she makes sure highlight and say revolutionary friend. And that's what I show off now.
Yeah, you could show off. I can't. My book is somewhere packed away, so I need to. I can't show off right
Listen,
now today. Let me
listen,
just
you
put it
have
that way.
memories, you have conversation, just give me something now, man. Just give me something now, you know.
I'll give you.
But
I'll give you a
give me a
memorabilia.
pass. Give me a pass this time. Give me a pass this time. You know. But I want to read this because I still need to get more information about it,
Understand.
and if you can help me, would be great. But of course, she starts off by dedicating the book to the memory of her father, Simon Jeffrey, of her mother, Adela London Jeffrey, and of her brother, Marshall Jeffrey, to the memory of all those who knew how to impart the use of historical continuity and who struggled to preserve our cultural heritage. To all those who today understand that those 30 years of pain are just the crossing of the desert. And I thought that was very important because not only does she highlight people who are very important to her, but she writes for those of us who would make it our assignment, as it were, our mission, as it were, to continue that struggle to preserve identity and culture. And she leaves us with a word of hope that those 30 years is just crossing of the desert, meaning that soon we'll be arriving at our oasis. So that's what I got. I
Yes.
just had to read that part, because somewhere, somehow, I think I would have learned or heard that her father, of course, played a major role, but I think he was also a Garveyite, you know. But again, I'm gonna continue looking because when I heard that, I was like, but wait, Papa Garvey strikes again, So again, I need to. And so if you know anything, you gotta share.
Yes.
You can't hold all that information from me, you know. So
Well,
okay,
if I were
so
to my own, if I were to go by my, can you hear me? I think there's a disconnect or breakup somewhere. I'm not hearing you so
yeah, there's a
well.
little delay.
Yeah, yeah. If I were to go by my own evolution in understanding St. Martin's culture and advocating for it as well, our history, our traditions, then I could also say that Daniela Jeffrey comes from a lineage of revolutionary thinkers, if not scholars as well, who not only on her own, she's found her answers and did her research, but she was quite instrumental. They were quite instrumental in guiding her to the position that she assumed in her life. Her love and her passion for St. Martin, be it her father or other members in the community who was talking about preserving that. So I know for my own, it has that influence in my life from a very early age is very is what I attribute to where I am in terms of how I feel about St. Martin and its culture and its people and its traditions, because I have had that education as well from a very early onset. And I believe Daniela Jeffrey also was exposed to persons moving back to St. Martin in her adult moving back to St. Martin in her adult hood, where she started to be more vocal about such positions and ideologies. So, you know, it's no wonder. I think for sure those dedications were merited in relation to where she is and what she was able to achieve with her books, her literature, and everything else that she has done in her time.
Nice, nice. So let's get into the preface, for example, right? The preface was
Yeah.
given by Professor Fred Reno, right? Um, very impressive, very impressive. He has some very impressive articles dealing with the question of French colonialism. I did not get a chance to go in depth,
Mm-hmm.
but because of reading the preface, I am now obligated to go and retrieve and rescue some of his articles because it's that interesting, you know. But I don't trust that laugh, you know. That laugh means you know something that I don't know, Soshina. I don't trust that laugh.
No, no, the same. No, the same. I haven't delved very much into him. I haven't done an extensive study of his work. But again, because of this book, because of having to prepare for this podcast, I was, tasked with having to at least familiarize myself with a few of his ideologies and what he has written and his contribution, to the discussion of French colonialism in the Caribbean, particularly and the French territories. But like yourself, I didn't delve too deep into it because my focus was on Daniela Jeffrey's work and preparing for this discussion. So I didn't do a lot of intense reading of Monsieur Reynaud.
Okay. Okay, fair enough. But what did you think about his preface? What stood out to you when you read his preface?
What stood out for me is the fact that he was, although it is of course the book of Daniel Jeffrey, but he gave it such personalization because I suppose that at the moment he was familiar with the nuances of what was the book, the purpose of the book. And so his writing or his preface talked to that era, talked to that experience, a shared experience almost, sociopolitically, traditionally of what was happening at the time, maybe in his own position. I think he was from Guadeloupe or Martinique, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a time where that discussion was the landscape of what was, a uprising in other French territories. And being an academic himself, he identified with a lot of the pain, your story of St. Martin's pain, and he was able to, for me, write from that perspective. So it was more from a shared experience. It was more to say, this is where we stand, not only St. Martin, but the French colonial countries, islands in totality, and we have a shared experience that we need to root out basically and just deal with. And I suppose from that perspective is how I would assume he wrote the preface.
Okay.
So it
But
was quite
did anything
precise.
in
It was
particular
almost
jump out at you? Hello? You hearing me?
many things, but not yes, many, but not particularly. Ask me the question you want to ask me.
No, that's what I'm saying. If, like, in terms of ideas or quotes or a particular period that he would have quoted that you said, well, that's interesting.
Not one thing, in several things that were written and said. For instance, the whole concept of St. Martin wanting to be a separate status within a colonial status, that was for me the vein throughout. And it leaves one or the reader to question really what does that look like? What does that actually mean? And I think there was a lot of focus on that. If you can't want to be separate, and I think that is mentioned also in the preface. You can't want to be separate but together at the same time, and that was one of the key things that, of course, stood out to me, which was the undercurrent and the idea for me and how that looked. So that was for me among one of the things that stood out, and there were
Okay, I think the internet connection
quotes is poor.
yeah, because I lost some of what you said earlier. So I'm not sure if it's on my side. Do you have any other Windows apps running in the background that might be taking up
No,
bandwidth?
no,
No?
I'm actually just using this from my tablet actually, so there's nothing else
Okay,
running.
no problem. No problem. I
Mm.
just closed down a few of my stuff, so maybe it's on my side. Okay. No, well, when I was reading it, right? When I was reading his preface, the preface, I thought to myself, if Daniela's book is a menu, his section would be the appetizer, basically preparing us for what is to come, and within his concise summary, he touches let me start off by saying that he lets us know from the onset that this book is not for the weak, because in this book she calls it for what it is, and he reminds the reader of Daniela's forcefulness, no holds punches and so forth, direct to the point. So it's not one of those books where they might find a way to sanitize, or even justify what has happened. All right. Whereas in this particular book, I think Daniela has done a great job to present why it has happened and how it has happened. Right. What I liked was
Yes, indeed.
when he quoted, and it's a very powerful quote. And not only is the quote powerful, it makes me wonder what was the social mood at the time that Daniela had to make this quote when they said, the quest for sameness is incompatible with the quest for distinctiveness. And I say that because
Yes, that is the
just
statement. Yeah.
yeah, yes, I remember that when I look at French colonialism and their policy of assimilation, we understand that their policy was to create Black French men and women. Okay, and we see this
Correct.
very clear in Frantz Fanon's life. Okay, they groom you, they
Yes.
prepare you, they indoctrinate you to the point where you think that you are French until you go to France or one of the other places and they remind you of your blackness, right? Because that's
I
what
think
happened
there's
with
also a
Frantz
part
Fanon. Sorry.
yeah. Sorry, I just wanted to interject. There is indeed a part in the book where that is very much mentioned and talked about in the preface, I think, or in the introduction. I can't remember which one now, where she says that the French, the idea of where the French came down was to remind post-colonialism is to kind of like make the Black person feel so French, but keep them so far away from being French as possible, you know? So you assimilate, you fall in place, but you're never quite French. You never will
Exactly.
actually be quite French because remember, you're Black, you're Caribbean, African. And that was also very much mentioned throughout her book as well. And
Yeah.
you know, yeah, but we'll get to that.
Right. So when I read the quote, I said, but wait a minute, right? And it rings true to what she said, that if you don't understand colonialism, you won't be able to recognize it. You see? So here we have a group of people, right, who is, I would say, maybe struggling with identity, right? Because for you to want to be French, right, or even Dutch, and still think that you will be able to maintain your identity, there will always be, in my humble opinion, there will always be some sort of warring of the souls, to use the words of W.E.B. Du Bois. Okay, there will always
Mm-hmm.
be that type of tension, that type of struggle, because we're having two different worlds with two different experiences, with two different imperatives coming together to occupy a space. And usually they will vie, one will vie for supremacy. And that is something that, have been, we've seen many a time. We see it on the southern in Great Bay also, right?
Yeah.
We see it also where, our culture, that's fine and dandy. Yes, we can speak English. Yes, we have the laws translated. But guess what? When you want the spirit of the law, when you want to understand its essence,
It
in that,
goes back to
you
the Dutch
have to go to the
language
Dutch
and the Dutch interpretation, the Dutch
and the
meaning.
Dutch interpretation. You understand? So that prevails. So when I saw that, I was like, you know what? I feel as though the book was written yesterday, because that is so applicable.
And
Okay,
I'm
it's
happy
so.
that
Go ahead.
you make that reference because in her book she also I'm happy that you spoke about that because in her book indeed she made references in comparison to the south side of the island, but also to Sabre, to Puerto Rico, to the other British islands that had a similar structure in their colonized existence within the European, the European colonizers. And I remember reading that she said it was no different. You have the people where they are supposed to be, well, with your regulations and different things. We're supposed to be uh, a people that want to progress. We talk about development, but development for whose benefit? It's still for the benefit of the colonizer, right? And I like when she said that, and then she made reference to the north side, the south side, and she made reference to Sabre. She made reference to St. Eustatius. She made reference to, again, like I said, Puerto Rico in relation to that particular statement to just illustrate how, the idea of St. Martiners being French or assimilating to the Frenchness is nothing to do with us. It doesn't serve us. It only serves them. But what it did come to do is destabilize who we are, our identity, with the influx of with your regulations, with your policies. All of those things were the mechanisms that they used to disrupt, destabilize, and dislocate our people.
That's right. That's right. And even next to that, because again, when we continue a bit more on the idea of the separate status within France, something that is very important is the fact that, and I think this point was made in the preface, right? That while they would have gotten additional responsibilities, right, they would have lost a large chunk of their sovereignty, you know? And that's something, again, I can make a connection with Great Bay, going through 10-10-10. It was all of this, all of this discussion about we're going to have our parliament, we're going to have our own ministers, we're going to have all sorts of things, right? But to me, now, with the benefit of hindsight, we see that a large portion of our sovereignty, has been given up. Okay, to the point where we have the CFT, we have these conditions. We see that if we want to make changes to the Constitution, it must go through the Hague, and there's so much more. The governor represents the Dutch monarchy and so forth. So at the end of the day, right, while our Council of Ministers and our parliamentarians are able to make some decisions, but when it comes to your budget, until the CFT and the governor gets that approval or gives that green light, right? You can bet that adjustments must be made, irrespective of the fact that the budget is needed to address social economic issues on the island. Irregardless of that, if their policy is, for example, of austerity, best believe that that's going to happen. So I was quite intrigued by the way how she framed that. You understand? And besides that too, Soshina,
Yeah.
what you want to say something? You want to jump in?
No.
Okay.
No, just to only say that some of the things I'm not hearing, like
The connection.
you
Oh,
can't
but
hear me
hold on.
completely. So I'm not hearing everything. Yeah, the connection is
Okay.
right.
Okay.
So I'm missing great chunks of what you're saying.
Oh boy. Okay. Anyway, let's hope that it fixes it corrects itself. But something else what I like about the way how the book is written, you are probably familiar with Greek mythology. And in Greek mythology, there's a particular deity or god by the name of Janus or Janus. And Janus or Janus is a two-faced, he looks in two different directions at the same time.
At the same time.
And this is something I feel, again, the way how the book is written, it forces me, right? It encourages me to really develop that skill to look in two different directions at the same time. Because with the information that she presents, I am automatically thinking about what happened. I am trying to connect it with what's happening now in order to better understand what is probably what is to come. And that is something I really found myself doing a lot, you understand, in an effort to make the book real, you know what I mean? To really make it real for not only myself, but also for anyone who I'm talking to about this particular book. Because it really brings a lot of things to life, and it does it. And again, I think Professor Renaud deserves his flowers in this regard. His ability to really pull out the meat and potatoes from the book and present it in a concise manner. Like, for example, let me get an example. In his preface, he talks about, I call it an unholy alliance. The unholy alliance consists of the political actors, economic actors, and the state. And he uses a very heavy term to describe that relationship. And I know you, with your legal mind, I know for a fact you began to salivate when you saw those legal terms, because I had to go in my dictionary to go look up and look for etymology and look for all kind of interpretations, because I could not believe what he wrote, because he just put it there.
Tell me.
Sorry?
Tell me. So share it with the audience.
He used the term complicity, the relationship of complicity, I think it's called. I hear watching my notes, so forgive me, okay?
No problem.
But this is the quote. When a political actor, okay, let me go back. So he refers to the political actors as consenting victims, quote unquote, bowing to the pressure of big business. You see, that in itself is a big discussion, right? Because some of us we went to big school, university, and so forth, and we learned about economics, right? And we learned about free market, as though the free market was somehow disconnected from politics and power, as if the market was so objective that it would have redistributed resources in the most efficient way based on supply and demand. And here comes this
Very.
professor, and to show you that there was a relationship between a complicit relationship between the political and economic, and then to drive it home, right? And this is a part I want to read. I'm going to use a quote now. He says, when a political actor does not blend with an economic actor, as exemplified by Fleming's scenario, I am assuming he's referring to a situation in where with the former mayor, the late Mr. Abel Fleming, right?
Yes.
And they are often engaged in complicit relations that produce interpersonal dependency and heavily influence the functioning of social activity. That is a quote I wanted to say. And then he went on to say, in many cases, the official decision is but a formalization of administrative arrangements which defies political rationale. In this game, the state, the arbitrator, and regulator adapts to the system as long as its interests are preserved.
So
No,
at this point,
go ahead.
when I read that, yeah, at this point when I read that, because that also stood out for me, I was just looking at how, first of all, she's very. That's a critique, you know. That's
That's
already like
heavy.
saying, "Hey, I know what you're doing." So it's like you
That's
said, it's
heavy.
brave. She's just putting it out there. So what she was able to do is provide a very clear critique of the political elitism that was happening at the time, at the period, and the almost symbiotic relationship that they had with those that were gaining the economic interests, not really the social. That we're not looking at how this benefited the social fabric of St. Martin. They were looking at what their economic benefits would be. So they were complicit with allowing the state to come in with all of these policies that were not at all for the St. Martiner, right? When you look at the regulation with the tax that she mentioned in the book, you know, that allowed the French persons to be able to come and just put up house in St. Martin. But what would that mean for the St. Martiner?
Mm.
Right? So when you have at the time the political leaders that were not saying, hey, no, this is not in the interest of our people. We are going to erode as a people. We will lose our identities. We will open up the floodgates for a lot of things to be happening to more or less erase who the St. Martin person is or how they stand in their own country. Then you are in fact quote unquote complicit because it serves your interest, but not the interest of the average St. Martin persons, not the
Correct.
grassroots people who are struggling, not, you know. So for me, when I read that, it made me, and I remember being young at the time in this regime when, and not understanding it. I was like 8 or 9. We're talking early 80s, you know, when the effects and the impact of these things were happening. But I remember
Yes.
hearing my parents talk about how this impacted them, what this meant for them economically, how this looked. They were already talking about the leadership that was not, that was, like you want to say back in the time, selling out St. Martin.
Mm.
You know, we were giving St. Martin away basically. So when she wrote that, it just threw me right back in that time when I was hearing my parents, my grandparents, my neighbors, and the average St. Martiner saying, hey, we are being erased. We feel like a paper with a pencil written identity of who we are that's being erased because of your
Yes.
policies, because of your regulation, because of your you know. So what is going to become of us? But who's benefiting from that? Not the average St. Martiner, but the elite, those that are complicit, those that are saying, you know what, okay, let's just, they say, lotto St. Martin. It was
Mm-hmm.
almost like St. Martin was a lottery, right?
Hmm.
And for me, it also taught, because, so what this book did for me, being from the North Side, knowing the struggle, seeing it from a very young age in my parents' house, in their salaries and their jobs and the opportunities, and some of them going away to work and coming back. some of them having been unemployed for a long period of time because of these types of occurrences that Ms. Jeffrey mentions in her book, and that Mr. Renaud was able to very vividly and very candidly bring out in the preface, is I can sit here as someone in my 40s and remember these discussions, remember the sentiments that people were feeling around those times when the complicity of the leadership was actually taking place. This is just yesterday for me.
Mm.
And the question now is, are we still in the same position? Are we better off? Who is now still standing to gain? Do we have some kind of, if you want to call it that, for where we are? Can we say, okay, we have progressed? Has the development and the assimilation program changed for us to include us, to benefit us? And so that is a question mark. And
Well,
that
what I
particular
can say,
quote, that part of the preface that you just read, go
what,
ahead.
what I can say is that, mindful of that unholy alliance, the state, let's go with the state has always done, and I'm speaking from someone from Grade Bay, the state has always done a great job to give the populace the impression that its interest is also the interest of the population. Meanwhile, the state is only concerned with its own self-preservation. So what would end up happening when I would, for example, listen to some of the utterances and the declarations of government officials when they want to talk about, well, we've created so many hotels and this will create so many jobs, right? But we do not get a share in the major decision-making aspect. Whereas in other islands, the local populations would have a bigger share in the management of some of these hotels and so forth and so on. They would talk about is creating jobs, but they fall short in talking about the type of jobs that these businesses will be creating. Okay, you heard the last part. Do I need to repeat? I need to repeat. Hello.
I can't hear. You need to repeat it. Yeah. Yes, please.
Okay, good. So I was saying that they talk about the jobs, but then when we look at the type of jobs that are created at times, it's usually short-term, seasonal, and the pay is very minimal. And consequently, some of these businesses serves as magnet, right? As a hub, it attracts labor, usually from the surrounding islands, and attract persons who would not mind working for a salary that the local population probably would not work for. You understand? But at the end of the day, it's about the state looking for ways to preserve itself. And if it means being
Definitely.
able to impact our natural environment, it will do so. If it means signing off on
Exactly.
an agreement, that,
Very much
go
so.
ahead.
That is exactly the scenario. That is exactly the scenario that she illustrated against that quote, against that statement that she made. Where you are having like persons coming in from the outside, further eradicating the opportunities for St. Martiners. She talked
Yes.
about 80% of St. Martiners, indigenous St. Martiners, are no, well, 80% of them are no longer indigenous St. Martiners, and 80% of them are foreigners, but foreigners that are also coming in and influxing the island, benefiting from these so-called state opportunities, right? But the St. Martin is marginalized in relation to how what they're calling development, right? Because this is all what the state is saying is a development for the island, for St. Martin. Oh, we're going to develop, we're going to bring in these opportunities for the country to develop. But in developing, the St. Martiner is marginalized.
And that's a painful part of it, because they throw around this word development, right, as if it's how you say, it's beyond reproach. And again, it's in your benefit. What we have learned from the Honorable Walter Rodney is that development is supposed to stimulate real opportunities and real
For the
outcomes
people.
for the people. That's what we learned from Walter
Yes.
Rodney. And anything outside of that is just imperialism in a different form. That's all it is. Okay, I can't remember the name of the brother. I believe he was the president of Zambia. He said first they came as colonialists, then they came as investors.
Yes.
You see?
Yeah.
And again, I have to pay homage to Daniela Jeffrey for making such an important observation. If you don't know what colonialism looks like, you can't recognize it. And I think that is something that we really have to pay attention to, right? Irregardless of which dispensation we find ourselves in, the system, it changes. It makes amendments. Let me put it that way, right? It makes some little, but the system itself doesn't change. The imperative does not change. The end goal does not change. And I think that was something very, very how you say, I really appreciated that the professor was able to extract that, because as I say, no, when I read the preface, I was like, this is a sign of something major to come, because he lays it out for you in the beginning. Besides that,
I'm trying to read my
something
notes
that
because there's something that you said that I had written down in my notes, and I'm trying to read through my notes to find that particular thing that I wrote, but I can't find it right now. When I find it, I'll come back to it.
okay, good,
But
no problem.
it was to add on to what you just said earlier, and I was like, I have something on that, but
No worries, we can get to it. We can get to it. But another thing that what really shook me, because I tell you, I was impressed with the bravery and the courage to call the thing as it is, and we learned from the book. We learned from the book of this term by the name of silent genocide. And you know what's interesting? What's interesting to me is that 1963 is considered to be, according to Daniela Jeffrey, a landmark year for St. Martin. We have the, what do you call it? The airport. We have electricity. We have a number of major things happening on the island. All right. So you have this going on. And then on the other side, right, in the 70s, 80s, throughout that 30-year period, she refers to it as a silent genocide. And that to me was heavy. You understand what I'm saying? Because as a young man growing up, you always hear about a friendly island. You always see the nice pictures with the tourists drinking coconut water on the beach, right? You're always seeing people smiling and going about their business. You're hearing about, our Panam. You're hearing about all of these things. And then here comes Daniela talking about a silent genocide that's happening. And let me tell you, not only was I, as I said, shaken to my core, and then you hear other terms like process of substitution, and you ask yourself, but wait a minute, maybe I dropped asleep at the wheel. You understand? Because when you look at, let me say, documentaries, you read books, genocides take place one time, hard and heavy. They're taking you out. The process of substitution, gradual. You understand what I'm saying? It's gradual, periodic, right? It comes in certain waves. But when she said silent genocide, I said, but so you mean all this was going on and we weren't aware of it? We wasn't seeing what was happening. We weren't familiar with the mechanisms that they were using, starting with the economic. You understand? Because I can deny you money, wages, capital, I can end up starving you eventually, or you're going to be back on my plantation. You know? So that's why I keep on saying that, you know, the preface alone, if this book is a menu, the preface is an appetizer. It really gets you ready. You
This
know,
is
what you think?
this is why I made mention at the beginning of the conversation when we were looking at the two periods that we asked about why the title, besides it being a shocking and a very bold stand up and, confrontational title, but it was also a clear depiction of if something is destabilized, right? There had to be something that happened before.
Before,
So
yes.
cause and effect. We were stable, some external came into play, and now we have destabilization. And the friendly island, the friendly people that we were when we did not realize we were being colonized, still, because this was post emancipation as well. There's the period that she delineates are very clear
That's
in
right.
the
That's
events
right.
and the dates and the times of what happened. So you have the period where right after emancipation, in her preface and even in her introduction, she talks about St. Martin's owning land, cultivating the land. We had the three industries. We had salt, we had farming and husbandry, and we had tourism, business, economics, right? So after just after which is still in the period where she's speaking about where we were as a people before destabilization came into play. We were landowners, we were business owners, we were getting paid for labor, right? And we in our mind were fine. And so when modernization came in the 60s with the electricity and the booming of tourism and everything else, we thought we were okay off too. But as Francis said, au fur et à mesure, little by little, you saw how that particular boom, and this is where she started to say, you know what, we need to start being awakened to what is happening. Because I know in several of her talks, when we talked, me and Daniela, she's like, yeah, there have been some colonizers in St. Martin, but the French were so cunning. They were the worst. And I used to say, but Miss Jeffrey, what are you talking about? How you consider all of them, any colonizers are bad colonizers? She's like, yeah, but you have degrees. You have different, no. And she was serious about it. She's like, because of this whole, because we talked about the assimilation of the French, how they did it, what they did from post emancipation, and then the introduction of, I don't want to call it recolonization because we were, after emancipation, we were still colonized. There wasn't emancipation, slavery done and we free. We were still French, quote unquote.
Mm-hmm.
But they had to find another means, another mode in which to keep us submissive, in which to keep us subservient, I would say. And they did that by saying, okay, we're gonna come in, we're going to give you this, we're going to give you opportunity, what we call opportunity and development, and we're going to get you to be so French, well, no, get you to be so sidetracked by what we actually want to do that you are not going to see, so you're going to fall into place. And we never complained. So we were the friendly island. We were tourist driven. The tourists came, they were like, oh yeah. We were not as confrontational at the time as Guadeloupe. We were not at the time confrontational like the other territories that there was a lot of tension around their identity and who they were, and so they were very reluctant to go in a certain direction. St. Martiners were always in at a point, friendlier because, like I said, we had our unique situation as post-colonial or post-enslaved people was different versus the other French territories, or even the north side to a degree for a short period of time. And so it was easy for the period to be moved when they saw that they were not getting anything because we could not be in a state where we are autonomous enough, at least in our minds, in our everyday living. We were, as I said, landowners and we were bartering with each other and everything else. And they were like, no, something has to, turn around. And so they came in with all of these different regu- whatever they used, of course, is going to be regulation. It's not going to be something that we're going to see outright and say, hey, France, you have us colonized, this is not good. So in her book, she was able to identify the transition from where we were in our status everyday life to where the changes occurred and that started the destabilization. But we were not cognizant of it until we were already in it and it was too far ahead, too far gone. And the different actors that knowingly, at a moment when they were aware of what happened, allowed it to perpetuate. Sorry. So yeah, the transition for me is what, as I said, stood out even in the title of the book. Where were we as a people before? What happened, and where are we now? Or since from then to now?
And you know what I also appreciated in the preface is that Mr. Renault, he introduces us to Aimé Césaire, right? Who was, popularly known for the negritude movement, him and others. And of
Mhm.
course, he would have written, Aimé Césaire would have written a very important book, which I would definitely recommend our listeners and viewers to get a copy of. I'm not mistaken, you can even find it online. It's
Yeah,
called A Discourse on Colonialism. So I would definitely ask persons to make time and add that to their reading list, because it's a very good read. It's a very good
yeah,
read, and something that Aimé Césaire always says is that any civilization that resorts to trickery, deceit, in order to achieve its aims is a dying civilization, if I'm not mistaken, and to paraphrase. Okay.
yeah,
So that gives you an idea that there were persons around informing us. I mean, from a long time, but informing us about how this particular system works. You see, and besides that, she introduces us to a term um, by the name of internal colonialism. So, in essence, we had to struggle against the metropoles, right? The French colonialism, and of course, you would always have the emergence of a, let's call it, a political elite, right? Or the head Negroes in charge. You understand? Who are just
yes,
there to execute Massa's will. And then next to that, we also then had to we also had to confront the capitalists, the business class, who are only interested in extracting maximum profit, right? And sometimes either reinvesting it for their own means or repatriating it to their mother countries. And then we were also forced with the arrival of our Caribbean brothers and sisters, who at times was coming from islands that were on a different trajectory, different values, as it were, different experiences, as it were, when it came to their social living. Go ahead.
yeah. I think also to add to that, the statement of internal colonization was also in relation to where we stood with Guadeloupe. I mean, we had,
Yes, yes,
let's just say
yes.
it's like a double colonization, right? So
That's
you're
right.
colonized by the state in terms of your ownership, right?
Yes,
But then you were administratively controlled by Guadeloupe because remember, until 2003, we were a commune of Guadeloupe, which
that's
means
right.
Guadeloupe now would dictate and say from France what St. Martin ought to do. So we had almost for years a double colonization, a double control at least, and that is something that we had to also contend with, until
Yes,
2003, I think 2003, 2006. I don't want to say this wrong, Lord, I should know. But yeah, so I think in reference to that is what she was also talking about. Um, so not only did we have to, be submersive to the French, the metropolitan what was happening in Metropole versus St. Martin, but also Guadeloupe, how they interacted with us, how they viewed us, where we were in relation to them. I remember discussions again of Guadeloupe having to manage our budget. So France will not send the money to St. Martin. No resources came to St. Martin. No, nothing came to St. Martin. It all went to Guadeloupe, right? And that was another element, another level or layer, if you want to add, to where St. Martin was at the time in the social and socio-economic, socio-political landscape of where we were at the time as well. And until the reform of 20, I want to make sure, yeah, 23, when we were able to break away from Guadeloupe, So, I think that is the reference that she's alluding to in her book with internal colonization, mostly in addition to the other elements that was going around and going on at the time. And that is something that a lot of readers also need to take into consideration, into account when they're reading her work or trying to understand where she's coming from in the story of St. Martin's in our development.
And I'm glad you raised that point, because on the southern side of the island, we had a similar experience. Because prior to St. Martin changing its status, its constitutional status, right? It was the group of islands were referred to as the Netherlands Antilles. And of course, 10-10-10, all of that changed. St. Martin and Curacao became separate entities. And then, of course, Aruba already had separate status from since the 80s. And of course, the island of St. Eustatius, the island of Saba, the island of Bonaire, they became public entities, some of whom did not vote for that particular status. But again, there is Dutch colonialism in your face, right? The people did not vote for that. They were forced into this particular constellation. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think what's happening in Bonaire, with their rapid development, quote unquote, with the increase in the population, I think I might need to send some copies to my family in Bonaire, to let them know that, hey, we on the island, we had this experience also, and these are some of the indicators that might assist, in making sense of what's happening in front of you. But yeah, so we had an experience because when I was growing up, also, you would always hear complaints about Curacao is taking the money and Curacao is always in control and Curacao has the most and so forth and so on. And even during the time when we had the roundtable conversations in terms of the political leaders who were negotiating. No, let me backtrack. I missed a few steps. You had the referendum, right? So the referendum, I believe it was in the last referendum, I believe it was separate status. The referendum before that, the persons wanted to remain in the Antilles. So at the last referendum, the people said we want separate status. Of course, the leaders at the time began their negotiations as such, and they wanted to leave, from under Curacao. Okay, that was a main idea because we were sending so much money to Curacao at one point when St. Martin was devastated by Hurricane Lewis, if I'm not mistaken. We were still required to pay taxes. So there was a lot of uneasiness. There was a lot of uneasiness at the time in terms of the acquisition and the redistribution of resources. That was always an issue. Then, when you listen to some of our parents who had to go to Curacao, some of them were, let's say bullied and teased. They were known as Beji of whatever have you. But, the relationship at times wasn't always at best because seemingly it was said that they felt that they were better than the other islands because of their size, because of everything else. But again, those are just some of the stories from some, and I'm sure maybe others have a different perspective, and that's fine. So I can see the commonalities. Yes, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'll let you. I'll read the
I
part.
don't want you to forget no. Don't forget no. I don't want you to forget that point.
I'll read the part that she mentioned, that because it was very interesting how what I appreciate about her and also Mr. Renault is the selection of words that they use, the way
Yes,
that the framing of what they want to say. you
that's right.
know you need to have a particular analytical mind to understand the context, what they're saying, and also look at the words that they're using,
Correct.
because anyone could write something, but they were so skilled in bringing across what they want to say, the words that they use to kind of paint an idea. When you are reading this, if you are reading it really from understanding
Yes.
the perspective of where the relationship lies, France to St. Martin, then you read it and you're like, I don't know about you, but every time I read it, I was like, what? Like, and that's only the preface. I could imagine the book when we
Exactly.
come around. But it's always like, So I wanted to finish speaking and then I would read a little excerpt of what she said in relation to where the double colonization happened. Because a lot of the times we focus on France, St. Martin, but we
That's
don't
right.
understand how double colonization also impacted us as a people,
That's right.
and I don't want to say stifled, but yes, stifled our dependence, because we became dependent twice. We would, and she talks about that. So I wanted to read that excerpt. Is about
Read
two
it. Go ahead.
paragraphs.
Go ahead. Go
Okay.
ahead. It's a good
So she
segue. Go
says,
ahead.
as the French constitutional reform on March 28, 2003, the Commune of St. Martin chose to separate from Guadeloupe and request the status of an autonomous overseas collectivity. By separating from Guadeloupe, St. Martin chose its own terms for dependency. So we're still dependent, like we said, but now we remove one layer of dependency. Similar to the other Caribbean countries under French jurisdiction, Marigot tried to adjust to its French connections instead of questioning their attachment. So instead, we are no longer under Guadeloupe, but instead of questioning our dependency to France, we adjusted. And that for me
Yeah.
was like, it blew my
Yeah.
mind.
Yes.
And it spoke to the state of mind we were in as a country.
Yes.
Okay, so she goes on. This is the trend observed in most non-independent territories of the Caribbean. Martinique and French Guyana are currently collectivities with a special status governed by legislative regimes identical to that of France. The case of Puerto Rico is interesting for St. Martin, as the American territories contemplates adding its star to the Charter of the United States. Saba, Saint Eustatius, and Bonaire, though autonomous, have become the equivalent of provinces in the Kingdom of the Netherlands. Some of the English islands, like the Turks and Caicos, are seeing their autonomy officially contested by the British government due to governance and corruption concerns. The independent island of St. Vincent, contrary to the will of its own prime minister, refused to become a republic and chose by referendum to maintain a symbolic general governor appointed by the British Crown. Dependency can, therefore, be conceived in some cases as a form of domination between actors functioning in solidarity, but unequal, possessing the material and symbolic means necessary for developing relational strategies between both parties. That when I read that, I was like, okay. So what stood out for me is, instead of when we had the power, for instance, to determine our own status, and this is why she said you cannot be separate status within France. But we didn't question the relationship. We adjusted.
Yeah. Yes.
We adjusted to become to remain within the French uh, state.
Correct.
And it's brutal to read, and she said that at the beginning, but this is the reality that we face. This is what,
Yeah.
and she's saying, hey, people, this is what's happening. This is where we are. It's not nice to read it, but
It's rough. It's rough. Okay. But again, we were warned. Okay. We were warned. And sometimes, just like aloes, just like the aloe vera plant, sometimes the bitter is a healing, you know,
yeah,
because you have a version, you have a narrative that tries to present this new status as if it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. Okay. And those persons, some of whom are aware of the fact that this new status, right, will not gel, it will not mesh, it will not be in harmony with the spirit of the St. Martin, or so to say. And that's the reason why I love her introduction, because in her introduction, she gives you a good idea of the Swaligan personality. Okay, and
yep,
we ain't gonna get into that this we ain't getting into the introduction this Sunday. We're gonna pack
yes,
it up for next time. And I'm gonna do that
yes.
intentional because I see the build up, and I am hoping that person gonna be like, you know what, I gotta get a copy of this book to find out what these young people talking about. Can't get them all one time, Soshina. Okay, we gotta
No,
build
we
up. We
cannot, and
gotta
we
build. We're gonna
shouldn't.
take our time and we're gonna build up. You see, because I'll give you a joke here. While reading, while revisiting this book, I said I need to go and start reading this one. If you can see it.
This, oh, nice.
You understand? Because to me, both of them, to understand one, you have to have read the other one. But that's just a nerd in me. You understand what I'm saying? That's just a nerd in me. So what I'm saying is that,
Look,
go ahead.
as I said last week in our, when we were just remembering her on her Earth Strong, her birthday, I am very much, I feel that at university level, our local university, our high schools, our secondary education, we need to be reading these books. I think political studies should be something that we all read as a St. Martiner and read our, I mean, we have Daniela Jeffrey, we have Jose Lake, we have all these persons that talk about the same things, just from different
That's
perspectives,
right.
from
That's right.
different experiences, but it's the same undertone, it's the same experience, it's the same colonizers, right? And we need to really read not one, not two, not three, all of them. Just like put it on your literature list, period. Make it obligatory literature to read in order for you to pass high school.
That's right. That's right. You're absolutely right. You know, you're absolutely right. I totally agree with
Because
you.
then if we don't do that, if we don't take that initiative, we will always, to me, we will be exactly where we are now. It's just a
Yeah.
cycle.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
And you know, go ahead.
while Europe has its agenda, we don't have one. Mac, we don't have one. So I think that we need to get to read these books from a very early age, um, and have an understanding of where we are as a people, as a St. Martin, as people living in
And
St. Martin.
and you know what I would also add is that when persons was presenting this new colonial dispensation, a part of me want to believe that they probably knew the direction we were heading into. And I say that because when you read the book The
Mm,
Republic of St. Martin by the Honorable
right.
Joseph Lake Jr., he quotes an article that says that the ultimate aim is to create, like, for St. Martin to be like basically a little island for the elites, for the rich and wealthy elites. That's the ultimate objective, you know?
Again,
And
to your
so a
point.
part of sorry?
No, saying to your point, Bonnier, Simbats.
Yeah. right next to each other, you see. And of course, they recognize um, the money that can be made on this island, the opportunities, right? And they have convinced themselves that this piece of rock is too good for us. Okay, that they have convinced themselves of that. They have convinced themselves that we are unable to manage our own affairs. And of course, you'll always have those, what does Reno call them? The victims, the political victims, what he call them? The consenting victims. You understand? You always have the consenting victims who will play into the hands of the colonialists. And that has been part and parcel of our experience. You see, part and parcel of our experience. And
Sorry,
and and
you will have to repeat that again. Sorry.
no problem. So I was saying that you always have the complicit victims who are part and parcel of the colonialist, the imperialist plan to take over a particular territory or space. They are vital to its plan. You understand?
It
Europe,
is. In order for the plan to
they can't
succeed, you
just
need
come
to have
down.
them.
They can't just come down and take over like that. They always need help. They always need help, and they're gonna always find a selfish group, right? Who is only willing to fulfill that position so that their families, so that their cronies, so that their people can benefit at the expense of the others. That's why sometimes, no, really and truly, when I see elections, and it's no disrespect to nobody, but when I look at how the state is set up and the elections, I'm like, but look at all of these people fighting to control us. Look at all these people and fighting to control how resources will be distributed. But that's just
Like
based
Renault
off of
said,
my experience. Go
like Renault
repeat that.
said, the resourcing, like Renault said, the resourcing of dependency.
Of course, of course.
That is what he
You
said
know,
in the preface.
yeah,
We are in a time where we are resourcing our dependency to the colonial state.
correct, correct. Because at the end of the day, they would be you. They will. It's like it's such a strange thing on in Great Bay. Yeah? We have a debt. Some say over 1 billion. I can't remember the exact figure, but it's relatively high, right? And instead of The Hague, let's say, forgives the debt, cancels the debt, they will quicker provide funds for projects. I think I think it just blows my mind. You know the reason why we need the funds. So why not eliminate the reason why we need the funds, but you're giving us funds for projects, right? For
We have
development,
the
and
debt.
usually it's your people that benefit from it.
Mhm. While we are still left with the debt.
We're still left with a debt.
So what you are doing is resourcing our dependency on you.
That's correct. That is correct. Because even when we look at the relationship, right, in terms of financing, if the island needs a loan, and if it gets a loan from The Hague, it is at zero interest, but of course with conditions. But if it goes to the international market, it will be at a percentage. There's probably conditions also, but of course, you see zero compared to 3.5 or 5, you might gravitate to the 0%. But of course, you are further locked
The
in.
austerity is so strong. Yes.
There you go. There you go. And it happens over and over, you see? So that's why sometimes when I hear certain people talk about culture and history and ancestors and such, I scratch my head. I scratch my head because you're in a position, right, to bring all of those nice ideas and talks into reality, right? But at the end of the day, we see the continuation of status quo. And I think these are some of the things that Daniela Jeffrey pointed out. She pointed out those
Yes.
contradictions brilliantly. You understand? Within her book, and as I shared with my partner earlier, this book in the hands of someone who is thinking, who is awakened, who is looking to try and understand what happened and how we got here can be a very revolutionary book. It's a very radical book. It's a very confrontational book. But it's not done to create strife and animosity. You understand? It is really meant to get us to be upset about our condition and how we allow things to happen to us on our watch. That's how I interpret
Yes.
the first few pages. I ain't going into the introduction. I'm gonna do that for spite. I ain't going into the introduction. The introduction gonna be sweet, girl. it,
Listen,
it gonna be good.
listen, listen. I mean, how many books does she have?
I have three, but I think there's about a few more in French, I believe, because she
I
has some
think
books written in
I
French.
don't want to miss out. Yes, she has, I think, one written in French and English, two in English, one written in
Yes.
French and English, and I think one written in French. So I think about 4 to 5 books, if I'm saying right. I could
Okay,
verify that.
good.
But what the point I was trying to make is, if we were to, I mean, like you say, you can't read one and then don't read the others and then be like, okay, I've read Daniela Jeffrey. You have to have the breadth
That's
of
right.
her ideas, her views, and understand why she says what she said. Because to the average person, this could be something crazy. This is a crazy woman. But what's she
Yeah.
talking about?
Yes.
Because she's able, like you said, to pull out the contradictions, but also the nuances, that
Yes.
in their paradox. They're not just like one or the other. There's contradiction, there are paradoxes that she's saying, hey, but that's because the St. Martin story is such a complex one. So
Yes.
it's not, she would be doing a disservice to only write from a unique a unique angle, or one particular angle, and not, you know, create the paradox and create the conflict, and highlight the conflict and say, hey, on one hand, we are complicit too as a people. But we won't hear that. Like I said earlier, it was hard. Some of these things are hard for me to read.
Yeah.
And some of it is hard for me to read because I I am very fit, but I don't know if they will. That is where I am now when I'm reading all of these literature. I'm like, will we really get out of this situation? As much as I'm,
Mm.
positive about it, as much as I'm, uh, looking at the things that can be done, and the question really is, if we continue as we are, is it?
You're
And
breaking
reading
up,
these
yeah?
texts, reading
You're breaking
her
up.
research and her
Repeat
studies,
the
reading
last
her.
part that you talked about. You're breaking up.
I need to repeat.
Yes, please.
I said that sometimes I sit down. Yeah, sometimes I sit down and I reflect on, what I would like to see for St. Martin, me at my age, in my time. But then I also quickly question whether or not we ourselves, whether it can change because of who we are, because of where we are. You know, the uh, the complicit. What did Renee call
Complicit
us?
victims.
Yeah, will we actually see the change that Daniela talks in her book and in her lectures? If you've delivered a lecture, you sit down and you feel everything. But the reality that also leaves with that you leave with also is hope, like we mentioned at her introduction when she was talking about that. But it's also really, is it attainable when we really look at all the players? that she talks of in her book. Is that really attainable? Like the question that you and I discussed before deciding to do this series, or is her book, is her literature still applicable today? I mean, we can talk, we can review her books, we can, and for me, I'm a pragmatic person. I'm a very realistic person. I can be that. I could also be idealistic, but most of the times I'm pragmatic. And we can talk about a book, and it's great. But I'm really sitting down and thinking, boy, we've analyzed the book. We know what she wants to say. Others have said it too. And she was able to, in her preface and in the introduction, give a trajectory, a 30-year trajectory of where we are, what happened from 30 years at the time she wrote the book back to the time, right? And how long ago did she write that book? And where are we today?
Yeah, scratch his head. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I there with you.
those are the kind of reflections that I have. Those are the kind of sentiments I feel when I read the book. Yes, I feel hope. I want change. I am vying for that. I see almost a prescription that we need to use to, instigate this change. But then at the same token, I'm like, boy,
Well, put it this way, right? Um, the fact that she was able to put this book together in the midst of all of that, I think she did it because she too had some hope that the ideas would have been used to take corrective measures. You know, so that alone inspires me. You see, that alone
definitely,
inspires me,
definitely.
and more importantly, when I extract again some of the ideas, the indicators that she used, her methodology, it informs my views, so that when I'm in a privileged position to speak, I am hoping that I can use that to inform, right? Use it to inform, and hopefully whoever is listening will review that which they thought was normal and natural. That's my biggest hope. And that's why, for example, when I speak with young persons, or depends on the conversation, I would always quote, whether it is Daniela Jeffrey or a Jose Lake or a Marcus Garvey, whatever, with the hope that by becoming familiar or introducing you to this person, to these ideas, right, that you would have then, take a look in the mirror and say, hey, you know what? I think I might need to adjust. You understand? I might need to reconsider. I might need to get the book. I might need to challenge what he said. Not out of disrespect, but out of interest, to probe further. So I look at it in that perspective. So it would be perhaps incremental. It would happen on an incremental basis, but progress is progress same way, in my humble opinion. Because if we got to take on everything, it becomes overwhelming. It becomes intimidating. You understand? It's like for example, the book Eat That Frog, right? It teaches you how to do things on a step-by-step basis.
Incremental. Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you, but I also want to provoke the discussion of the time, and it will happen. Incremental change will still change. One step is still a step forward. One step
That's
forward is
right.
still going forward. You're not regressing. But it's really to kind of like put a call to action.
That's right. Good
You
point.
know,
Good point.
to the listeners, to leaders, to persons who have the power, who are in a position to influence and enact the recommendations in that book, to really take stock of your actions to get us to that point. We
That's
have
a
our own
powerful point.
responsibility to do so. So it was not at all to diminish hope. It was not at all I did not say it to engender any kind of fear or hopelessness at all. On the contrary, I
Good
know
point.
that you and I are discussing this. We have a view about what we want for our nation, St. Martin, South Side, North Side. It doesn't matter for me, St. Martin. But maybe perhaps others are not as
Familiar.
hopeful in their outlook. Familiar, but also in the outlook of what Martin
Okay.
how St. Martin can become. And they are asking those questions. So I want to speak to them. I want to listen. Yes, the book speaks of hope. There's a, as I said, a blueprint, a prescription almost for how we can get to where we want to get. But without the correct actors behaving in a particular way, it would be, you know, you and I on our own can talk to others and encourage each other, others. But at the end of the day, the baton is with the leaders and persons who have the power, those elite persons that are called to see things from a different perspective and enact, take action basically. And that is where I wanted to touch on, you know,
But
because there are a lot of
that's a brilliant way of putting it. That's really a good way of putting it. But let me ask this, because we are reaching our 90-minute mark, and as I said, we won't go into the introduction today. So I might
I
have to
think we did a
beg
good
you.
job of not doing that.
What is it? What is
I
it?
think we did an excellent job of sticking to the preface.
Correct. Correct. Because I would really love for us to do it on a section by section, because at the end of the day, it's not a race. You see what I'm saying? I really want us to enjoy this journey together. So I was gonna say, was there anything in the preface that you perhaps disagreed with or caused you to question why would he have phrased it the way he did, or why would he have used this particular example? Or did he leave you wanting more information? Let me put it that way.
For me, I read the book not from a perspective of agreeing or disagreeing. First of all,
Okay.
it was more to, like you said, it was more information exercise and an exercise for me to understand the landscape at the time and to really make a parallel to where I am now in a similar context. There were some things, a lot of things, and that's why I say I was very fascinated with the way they used the language to describe a lot of the climate at the time, the
Yes.
landscape, the political, social, economic landscape at the time that led to the book, and to kind of like give, for instance, in the book at the preface, it talks about having a present but forward-looking approach to the situation on St. Martin. So that already let me realize that this is not a book that's written for the time and what happened now and this is where we are.
Correct.
But it was really something, a blueprint almost, for us to look forward to where we as St. Martin's could look. And I was curious and fascinated with some of the way that they phrase certain things. I love reading. I love intellectual discourse. So for me, it was very interesting to see the composition, the words that they use to make illustrations, comparatives, some of the terminologies. I was very much looking at the definition of things, how they defined
Yes.
certain situations, context, and also for me, it was more to do with the audience that they wrote to.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
That for me is what stood out. I didn't have there were some things I was like, that was curiously worded or phrased, but not that I necessarily either totally agreed with it or disagreed. I didn't have that at the time of reading it. Maybe if I read it a few more times and really go down and analyze it, I could come to that, to really what I disagreed with or not. But at this point, when I read it for the discussion, when I read it to understand it for myself, again, I have this book, but I didn't read it. I spoke to Daniela about the book. So we talked about some of the findings, how she came about it, you know.
Okay.
So there was a lot of personal discussions that I sat down with her to read because I didn't get a copy of the book at the time. And so I was looking at her copy and just going through some things and telling, and basically just discussing it with her. So I am yet to do that deep analysis of what I either agree with or disagree with. But for me, at this instant, it was more to understand the context and to inform my own ideas of my own view of where I stand also as a St. Martiner at this juncture. So, but fascinated with the wording, the construction of what they wanted to say and what they wanted to paint, the audience that they're speaking to. That for me stood out the most.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you. There wasn't really much I disagreed with. I think I was just impressed with Professor Renault's ability to really capture the main ideas in the book
Definitely,
and give it
definitely.
the necessary context, and he gave you enough to want more. Okay. And I am hoping that we were able to achieve our objective in causing our viewers to want to learn more. All right. So, with that said,
Yes.
Soshina, we are going to round off. And I would like to invite you to share some closing reflections, right? And I also want you to consider, you don't have to tell me no, but consider let's have this conversation again at least in the next month, at least next month, so that way it's once a
Oh
month.
God.
We get time to read, reflect, digest. So your closing remarks,
I
please.
will speak to you after. So my closing remarks are this. You like to. My closing remarks are simply this. I am very happy that you invited me to discuss this book, which forced me to, of course, as I said, read it in a little more detail than I had initially done at the beginning. I eventually got my copy, so I was able to, at the time, I was able to look through it, but I did not read it. So it was more intentional for me this time around. And it really reignited and resparked the the sentiments that I had and really kind of, like rile up the passion in me again. And if that could happen for me, I think it will serve anyone who's interested in St. Martin's growth and St. Martin's preservation to read this book. I would not say the St. Martiner, but anyone who has a passion for St. Martin's growth, St. Martin's well-being, should read this book. And particularly, as I said, I am very passionate about the young persons having access to this material because I think we are in an age in an era where we need to understand. We're talking, a lot of us are talking, and it's great that we are doing that, the conversations are coming up. But I think we need to really get a fundamental root out the issues, which have always been our how can I say, our holdbacks, I want to say, but also, like Daniela pointed out in her book, forward looking, what it is that we have prescriptions, we have blueprints, we have ideas that we can use to really see ourselves through to where we want to be as a St. Martin nation, as a people. And I think we need to make a lot more use of the material that is available to us. And I urge
That's right.
everyone again to read your book, familiarize yourself. You don't have to read it and get summarized versions of it, get the summaries, understand what the authors and the core issues are for St. Martin as a nation, um, and try to place yourself in a position of where St. Martin could look like what is discussed in these books, and it's not. I think what I want to actually urge people to do is not read this as an abstract idea. It's not we are here and the idea is there or the book is written, but it's no. It is really the reality of where we are now, and we need to be cognizant of all the surroundings we're faced with, because we are still dependent, we're still colonized. And until we have an understanding of why and what brought us to here, where we are today, our our complicit, our contribution, we will, we will we can get past it. And by reading some of these books and understanding the author's ideas. And like you said in the question, whether it's a matter of agreeing or disagreeing, it's fine, but at least you can form and you could have a position,
Correct.
whether for or against, but by having read that, and you can't do it. And I know, and Daniela used to always say, in order for you to write and to have an opinion, you have to read. You have to immerse yourself, you have to be informed, and I really believe that she left with me very, very fondly, that read to understand, read to grow, read to write, even if you want to write. So I leave that with my audience, and I urge you to get a copy of the books, all of her books, and other authors on the islands, and really get a good landscape of where St. Martin is, and how we can get through and past where we are today.
All right. All right. Great. Thank you so much. Well, family, there you have it. The first installment to our online book club where we covered the preface of the book. What are you laughing for?
You,
We still live,
you,
you know.
I,
We still live. You
I
can't be
know.
laughing.
I love it. I love it. That's why I love it. It caught me out. It caught me by surprise, but I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Well done.
Right? So where we cover the first installment of the book, St. Martin, Destabilization of the French Caribbean. Today we just covered the preface, of course. We talked about what jumped out at us. We tried to make the connection between what was written then to contemporary issues. And we kind of skirted and flirted around the idea of what needs to be done. But next time we shall be diving into the introduction. And in the introduction is where we really start to, get a better idea, a sharper focus of what is to come in the chapters thereafter. So therefore, as Soshina said, we encourage everyone to get the book, buy the book, borrow the book. I'm going to say thief the book, but get a copy of the book, read it, because we would love if ones and ones were to join us online and make a contribution, because it's not only about Soshina and I, it's about community. All right. It's about being able to exchange ideas and learning from one another. As I would say, iron sharpen iron. Well, in this dispensation, we need plenty iron. You understand? Because the
Definitely.
system as it is has plenty heads and plenty tentacles that we're going to have to address it and confront it, you see? So the more ideas, the better. And of course, whatever you've heard, maybe you disagree with what we've said, maybe you agree with what we've said. Bring it forward. Let us reason together. Let us come to a common understanding, because that is what made us great. Okay, that is what made us great. There's a Ugandan proverb that says to discuss the problem or to discuss disagreements, you've already solved half of the problem just by mere conversation. You see? So let us take up on that ancient wisdom from our ancestors and going forward. Family, this brings us, we are going to adjourn. I'm not going to say close. I'm going to adjourn this particular meeting. We give thanks for your presence. We give thanks to SM Academy SBO. That's my queen, of course. Ramonda, Aminata Kujabi, tuning in from the Gambia. Greetings, queen. Ua Abantum, coming from Jacksonville, Florida. Give thanks, strong Gavi there. And of course, everyone else who will be tuning in the near future, of course. As I said, we hope to come back in the near future to discuss the introduction, of course, and of course we look forward to hearing from everyone. So, family, I leave you in the words of the most honorable, right, and excellent Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Up ye mighty race, you can accomplish what you will. One God, one aim, one destiny. Take care and be safe until the next time. One love.
Thank you.